What is required of us now is to truly understand that change is the only constant.
Joanna Kerr, very nice to have you on the World Beyond Resilience podcast. Thank you for coming on board. Joanna has been leading large, complex social environmental change organizations for the last 25 years and is currently the president and CEO of Make Way, a Canadian foundation and charity that builds partnerships to help nature and communities thrive together. And Joanna, you have a lot more to say, I'm sure, about what you've done in the past. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, you're reaching me on the eve of my departure from beloved Make Way, a fantastic organization. I'll be leaping out into the world, starting a company called NutHatch Leadership the Way the Planet Intended, to be providing coaching to young people and change makers and philanthropists who are on the front lines of systems change. But prior to Make Way, I led Greenpeace Canada, and prior to that, I was the global CEO of ActionAid International, working across 50 countries. I've had stints with Oxfam. I led a large international feminist organization network called the Association for Women's Rights and Development. So I've had some really amazing gigs along the way with a lot of resilience required. So that's why this podcast feels particularly apt.
Well, it's so great to have you here. And with that amazing CV and experience, I'm sure you will be a wonderful coach and mentor to all these aspiring young people. But we want to learn much more about you and your approach to resilience today. And our first question really is to go way back to the beginning to understand from you, what is it in your background, in your childhood, that perhaps formed your first impression of what resilience meant and what it meant in terms of your approach to the world?
It's a very clear, very vivid memory. My father, I was 9 years old. My father got a job in Tanzania, East Africa, as a mining engineer. And he and my mother decided to move to Tanzania. This would have been 77. And my older sisters didn't have a place to go to school in Tanzania, so they were going to go to England to do their schooling. So it was this trip where my father had gone ahead to get things going, set up for my mother and I in Tanzania. And my mother and I deposited my elder sisters at boarding school in England. And we had to sew labels onto all of their clothes in the final days. And it was just heartbreaking, tear-felt goodbye, because it was going to be months and months before we would see all one another. And then I basically put my mother on the airplane as she was a kind of bedraggled mess as we flew from London to Dar es Salaam. And she'd been the one packing up the whole house and obviously depositing her kids. And arriving in Tanzania to hand my mother over to my father and him receiving us and us putting my mom into the hotel bed after this long journey. And then me just looking at my dad. It's like, okay, we've taken care of mom. Now, dad, show me Africa. And for those several years that I was there as the only child with my two older sisters, it was very tough times. There was a war on with Uganda. The border was closed with Kenya. There were drastic food shortages. There was cholera epidemics. And so my mom and I had to figure out literally how to put meals on the table and make clothes and navigate all the things around us, from rats in the house to actually finding a place to live, with my father often on the road doing his work. And honestly, those were the best years of my childhood because it was just so raw, so profoundly connected to nature and, yeah, what it meant to be human at this time. And it was also the time where I learned about white privilege, because even though we had nothing, we had no diplomatic status, and we come from just a middle class background in Canada, but I just knew that I had access to an international school with, I had access to boiled water, all of these things. But that was highly formative years of building my own resilience, surviving
How
and
old were you
thriving
then?
in this part of the world.
How old were you then? So
So
just
yeah, it
kind of,
was like from 10 to 13, there I was doing all of that.
wow.
And
So
yeah.
already at 10, you were almost taking care of your mother as
Yeah, she
she got
remembers
off
it
the plane.
very
Wow.
vividly, that I just had this. The two of us were a team trying to figure it out. How to, how could we make desserts when there was no chocolate? All the things that we managed to figure out with using bananas and cashews. It was just really, it was quite fun.
So this way of moving forward with a whole other environment and not the same resources and less resources than what you were used to, like an abrupt change.
Yeah, completely. No television, right? All of a sudden, all of my entertainment came through books. And yeah, there was a drive-in movie theater that we'd go to, but it was just all the entertainment and what I got to learn came through relationships with people and relationships to nature. We were right on the Indian Ocean. I was a 10-minute walk from that beach. And yeah, that ocean was my teacher. And it's incredible.
What's the word that you would use to describe resilience as you experienced it back then?
It was a kind of a curious trust in,
Community.
yeah,
Community in the sense of you and your mother, or community in the sense of, so who else was there with you?
it was anybody who has to live through a hardship, and there were hardships. Honestly, when I say there were very few things in the stores, like scrawny little chickens, rice with little stones in them. Someone would flash the car down to say a box of cornflakes has just fallen off the back of a ship. Get there, they're giving out one box per family, and we'd receive it, and they'd be stale as can be, but Mom and I would figure out how to toast it. And hey, have cornflakes. So everybody supports everybody. It was a international and Tanzanian community that we were part of. So everyone is there to support each other in. There was malaria, cholera, all sorts of tummy bugs. There was violence around us. The resilience comes from that leaning into others. It was a highly social time. We'd have people over 3 or 4 times a week, and you're always trading tips and, yeah, how to take care of one another. And so I learned that from a very young age.
It
And
sounds
that's
remarkably
defined part of my
terrific.
leadership, I would have to say, in terms of the organizations that I've But
Do you want to say more about that? Because that was going to be one of our questions, but I'm just noticing that it sounds remarkably joyful, despite the difficulty and the tears and the suffering that you have had leaving your sisters.
Yes, I would say that part of my philosophy in life has been that change happens at the speed of trust, and that I absolutely believe in the power of relationships and interdependency and understanding almost systems as completely interdependent. And so much of that was joy-filled in terms of hosting, creating spaces where people could come together. Any of my close friends will tell you that around my dining room table, you will never escape a round of powerful questions where we're asking something very meaningful about what someone is dealing with or whatever it is that you're taking at this time. So to lead organizations whereby the whole is greater than the sum of the parts and the relationality between units, countries, themes, functions, it's all about the more everybody understands how all the different parts of the organization, from the partners to the funders to the board to the different regions, and the more we interact, the more resilient we are. And that comes from nature's teachings to us. You have a forest that's a one monoculture crop and it's hit by a fire, it will go down and it will probably never regenerate. But a intact and biodiverse forest that's hit by a fire will often survive the fire but will also regenerate very quickly. So it's always been about this very profound concept of diversity as resilience, of interdependence, of community. And yeah.
Can I ask a quick question on that? Because one of the things Angela and I were discussing before we started on this was the fact that there is a kind of narrative around the CEO of the organization being lonely at the top.
Mm-hmm.
Have you experienced that in your roles as many CEOs, or because that's very different from the way you're talking right now? So what's the difference between the CEO as lonely at the top and what you're describing?
It's not so much lonely, it's a shit sandwich. Because you've got the external or the board accountabilities and then the staff accountabilities and the partners. So you're constantly having to hold the creative tensions between these multiple, sometimes contrasting demands. And you will always have parts of the organization that want to pull it this way, and this is the right way, but there's 1,000 paths forward. So sometimes the lonely part of it is how do you continue to shine the light on the tensions and get people to get out of right or wrong thinking or left or right thinking or national versus international or whatever, all the polarities that you can manage inside related to big organizations.
My department versus your department.
Yes, exactly. But I always had a community around me that fed me. I have also had coaches to take some of these difficult polarity questions, creative tensions, to road test some of my own thinking. I journal. And as the years have gone on, I've relied heavily on a meditation practice to ground and to become deeply connected to divine intelligence, cosmic energy, source from the source. It's not all up to me, right? I am merely a vehicle to help folks make connections with others and to what is in their own heart and gut in terms of what's the right thing. So not lonely, sometimes at that pinch point of holding all the pieces together. And I think that's, having to hold all that sometimes at the most important intersections. I'm looking forward to stepping out of that. What would that be like when I'm not the one ensuring that all those things are woven together and that their neural pathways exist between all of the different parts of the system, and to be hanging out much more in the canopy, as we'd say, Angela. That's what I'm looking forward to.
It's a lovely metaphor, isn't it, to talk about the role of the CEO as weaving things together rather than holding it all by yourself.
Yeah.
And
it really is it's a metaphor because different types of CEOs, some will see their organizations as machines. It's almost at kind of their own worldview. And then other CEOs will actually see their organizations as living systems, which I would argue is a more realistic thing because it's filled with dynamic energy that is very much influenced by the ecosystem, climatic, economic, political. And so if you really understand organizations as living systems, then it only makes sense for the CEO to see themselves as the gardener, that where you're fertilizing, making sure there's light. You might be letting certain parts of the organization go fallow, or here we are giving greater attention to, but understanding that these gardens are pollinating different parts together. But if you see the organization as a machine, where everything has to be tuned up and it's performance based, and I'm at the top to make sure that I'm like chief mechanic or driver of this machine, then it's a very different worldview way of seeing it. And then there are those that would see an organization like a family, and where there's like the head of the family. And so there's like those are unions, those are almost academic institutions, military institutions, where it's a very hierarchical thing. Again, at the top, it's the responsibility, and that's where expert leadership is more perceived to be like that. So it is an evolution of understanding of how organizations work, and you're less lonely in the garden than you are driving the machine or the patriarch as the head of the family.
Part of the reason for us doing this podcast is because we've noticed that resilience, the way it's defined, is very much tied to this industrial worldview, this mechanistic worldview. How do you see the different definitions of resilience changing given the different worldviews yourself?
So in thinking about this conversation with you all, there's a before and an after in my life as well. So I've told you about my childhood, but 20 years ago, my father died very tragically from suicide, and we didn't see it coming. And he was a close friend. He was my rock. He was very involved in my work. And for that whole year after, if you had tried to tell me that the world was flat, I could buy it, because everything that I knew to be true was completely turned upside down. The only silver lining of his death is that I am so much more of a resilient human and leader because I survived the greatest heartbreak that I could possibly imagine. And it was a very traumatic experience in our family, and it took years to process the PTSD from it while running a big organization at the same time. And I share this story. I've shared it in other places, but I share this story as well. Is what is required of us now is to truly understand that change is the only constant. And so my example was so disruptive, was so shocking, was so unbalancing. It was so heartbreaking in every way. And then to be able to witness and benefit from the strength of community, to be able to have joy again from that, after that, which didn't seem possible in that first year. And so I think right now, what's happening economically, socially, politically, and climatically or ecologically is creating small t traumas all the time with people. And the more, therefore, we build the muscles after these to say, oh, things aren't linear. We always thought that things would just keep getting better, or the moral arc would always bend towards justice. Oh, wait, we're going backwards on this. This looks super bleak. This tragedy has happened here. And yet people continue to show up with hope, with active hope, with joy, with the ability to use that experience in a way to learn from it, grow from it, and put actually love back into the system as a result of it. So that is what I see, Angela, is that what this time offers is to be using the small t traumas or some of the big T traumas to actually build very new muscles. And for those of us who work with lots of folks who haven't had yet to deal with something very painful and very traumatic, that we can build the muscles together, because the capacity for the human spirit to heal or include and transcend out of trauma and pain into something that is so transformative and so beautiful. That is the calling now, right? And I believe all the crises and all the shit that's going on, there is going to be a major shift in consciousness because people are going to wake up from the material consumerist asleepness of I just need to get my beach holiday in and my Louis Vuitton and all the things, but oh, there's something more to this. And part of that, this is about community and what it means to be alive at this time.
I really get you. And this is the conversation we have. And to add to what you've said, it's time to let go of the old narratives that we get validation from the self-made, doing it on our own. That no longer be this criteria for being the right person, but really the fact that we can actually do it together. And then a new criteria for true open-heartedness.
Yeah.
You've spoken about heartbreak I think there's so many out there that won't let their hearts break.
Yeah.
They'll hold it as tight as possible, and then they will suffer. I'm noticing my own jaw like go really tight there, and they'll grit teeth and force, and without any judgment. I think we have to let go of this paradigm. There's this way of thinking, this worldview that I just have to, what is it? Keep a calm and carry on, stiff upper lip, just soldier on.
Yeah.
That true resilience from what you're saying sounds like to be open, to let yourself be cracked open. And
Yeah.
I want to add to that. You've described two really disruptive and potentially, in one case, potentially traumatic, the other case, quite traumatic experiences, and how those experiences forced you to work with the community and to open your heart up to being in a community. And I personally have experienced being in a war zone where it's a similar thing. You're under such pressure that all of a sudden you become best friends with all the people around you, and that they're really important to you, and your heart, like you said, is open. You talk about the most important things. And my question to you is, with all these small t traumas that are going on, there is a push, there is a feeling that people have to move more into community. But I'm wondering whether you think that people know how to do that anymore, and when they're not forced in the way that you were to do it. How do you think people can go down that path right now?
I think that's part of the silver lining or the gift of these really hard times. Here we are. I'm calling in from a country that's called Canada, where there's a man south of the border that is challenging our sovereignty. And what we're witnessing is all of a sudden this groundswell of community organizing to say, what does it mean? What is it that we cannot lose? And people fight for what they love, right? Whether it's your family, whether it's your values, whether it's your favorite forest that you walk in, whether it's your sovereignty. And so the more those things become threatened by any of those forces, economic, political, social, ecological, people will be forced to get off of their phones and step out of their homes and get into, wait a minute, I don't want to lose this. And they'll be looking for many of the folks that are out there to say, what can I do? What can I do? And I must be having conversations 3 times a week. What can I do? And I say, find your organizing home. Start as local as you can, whether it's the conversations that you're having at your dinner table, with your book club, with your choir that you're part of, your paint class, your dog walker group. Get out there and talk to strangers and find out what they are thinking about. And that is piece by piece the way that we start building, weaving these communities around the things that we need to protect and save the things that we love, and also build the things that we need to be building the new for. And so it's when I see more and more people feeling threatened, they're coming out of the woodwork. They're waking up. And the expression in Canada right now is elbows up. It's a hockey expression, but elbows up. And my mom said, I want an elbows up t-shirt. So I just got her an elbows up t-shirt. This 87-year-old woman, she's marching around in her condo, and it says, don't mistake kindness for weakness. And so here we are in this moment to protect the things that we love and that we certainly don't want the man below the border to take away from us.
You have such faith in organizing and community.
It's the only thing that's ever worked.
But there's joy in it too. I hear the joy in it, the joy of connecting with people and the excitement and the potential.
And the life.
I wonder whether people feel that. Do people feel that or understand their own capacity and their capacity of joining in with people to fight for something they
I'm
love?
fascinated with Denmark. And so in my mini sabbatical last summer, my partner and I spent 3 weeks in Denmark because they win all the happiness index, like why is it the happiest? And one of the reasons it's the happiest country in the world is because every Denmarker is part of these clubs. They have all these clubs, the club. So these social networks are essential. And as social media has contradictorily, ironically, created more loneliness than ever, we actually need to get people back into social life again. Join a club, create a club, talk to strangers. These are the things in which we're going to build the future that we all dream about. And it takes courage, but yet what you get back from it is tenfold, right? Because it's not all up to you. If I know all my neighbors and I have all of their phone numbers, and if something should happen, that I can reach out to them, and I'm not alone in any of this. And the day that I got the phone call about my father, I happened to be on the other side of the planet in Thailand, about to put on a conference for 2,000 feminists that I'd been organizing for 2 years. And it was literally the day before, and my phone had been ringing off the hook. And so I got the news, and then I had to make the decision, obviously, to leave my colleagues and to head back to Canada. But I actually happened to be there with some of my closest friends, and 2 of whom had lost parents to also very tragic circumstances. And I grabbed them both and I said to them, I think I'm going to lose myself. And they said, no, you're not. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. And it was to have somebody bear witness who knew me, who'd experienced such terrible trauma, to know that what comes after is going to be hard, but you're not going to lose yourself. You will come back. In fact, you'll come back stronger. And so it is the way in which we can bear witness to one another at different points in our lives, to fight for what we love and to see one another. That is what is possible at this time and going forward. It's the silver lining of these terrible times.
It also sounds like the deep, rich soil of the new growth of these terrible times through them.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know what I hear as well? It's more from your first example, scarcity creates abundance, in the sense that you've lost things that you needed or thought you needed. And all of a sudden it allows you to go in a different direction. It allows you to connect with people in a different way. It allows you to do things in a different way that is even richer, perhaps, than what you had before.
Yes, I would agree with that. And we are brainwashed in our societies with this false sense of security, that security comes from the right eye cream, the right locks on your door, the deluxe, like when you rent a car, how many times are they saying you need this insurance? in this insurance. Like, we are bombarded by marketing messages as to what will make you a better, more secure person. But really, our security and our sense of self comes from something that is far more innate, far more intuitive, and far more connected to Mother Nature. And once you wake up to our deep, profound connection that we are not responsible for holding the whole, that we are all interconnected, that security is very liberating. And so once you see it in those organic terms, as opposed to something that is the grand material things, I've taken on quite a large mortgage later on in my career. And because I want to live generously, and I want people to be able to come here and stay here in this house. But, my partner and I have said, and if we have to sell it, if we have to rent it out, it's fine. This is not our sense of security. Our sense of security, it comes from our relationships and how best we show up for one another in these very volatile times.
I can add to what you said. I lost my house to fire when my 3 children were small. And I remember we were actually on holiday in another country when it happened. So we weren't present to the fear and the trauma that would have generated had we been there. But I still remember the conversation I had with my husband at the time, and he went, "You don't understand. All of my life was in that house." And I went, "No, all of your life is here with yourself and us." And it wasn't even trying to be positive. It's just, life is where you are in that moment, and the things are gone. Life is where we are. And I can really relate to that. Being able to navigate uncertainty is knowing where the life is and in the connection.
We share that. My house burnt down in 1996 too, and I lost everything. That's right. And I was on vacation as well. And so I had the suitcase of things. And so all the photos, the grandmother's quilts, the pieces of jewelry, and all those things. But no, we're still here. We are still here. And the way in which the community showed up for us and threw us like these incredible parties and the hand-me-downs that we were given, just some hilarious pieces of clothing that I wore for years because it was just all part of the like the fire sale. And then I went through an end of a relationship where also I lost almost all my possessions one more time again. And so I've had to learn to not have much. I have this expression called poof gone, something that I might have liked, and I lost it. It's like, oh, poof gone. Okay, there you go. So not to have that attachment to these material things, but at the same time to be a caretaker, to take care of them. And so when I do see people finding their security from material things, I appreciate it, I understand it, but we're going to see a hell of a lot more tornadoes and floods and all sorts of things. And so if that is your source of happiness, you got to learn how to let go pretty soon, honey.
And even the source of ground, I think. That's the recognizing that everything changes. We're going to learn very soon that nothing is permanent. Right. And so that source that you were speaking of, maybe we could come back to that, your personal practices and how they relate to community as well, that they're not separate. The reason I'm speaking about this is because often the definition of resilience has been built on such an individual model. And yet the truth is what you're saying. It's all in community. We're nothing without each other. And there's a certain amount of practices that we can have, or that we can continue, that whatever happens in times of loss and times of abundance, that we can always connect with. And I think I heard you say before that your personal practices also connect you to something greater. It's not just an individual thing.
Yeah. It was probably the hardest leadership transition that I had to make, was separating myself from the projections that were on me as a CEO. Tell us what to do. It's all up to you. All of that. I was running a very large organization in my early 40s. I was relatively young, and 2,800 staff, and there was a crisis every week. And it's in the quiet moments, I would have a lot of, oh shit, what to do. And it was really then that I had to keep working on, this is not up to me. I need to source from the source. What can I let go of? What can I delegate? How do I build collective leadership tables? How can I, when people say, tell us what to do, Joanna, it's, I don't know. What do you think we should do? Where you have to be enough of a vulnerable leader to be able to step in to say, I don't have the answer any more than you do. So let's figure this out together. And so the practice had to be, I'm a very visual person. It was often meditating, just focusing on all the roots that my body had into the earth. But because I was often traveling and having to move a lot of things forward, it was the swan, Rilke's swan on the river. Just all of a sudden, when you're on the river bank, the swan is very gangly and awkward and can't move very much, very smoothly. But the minute she slides into the river is now carrying her, and she can travel with such ease. And so I would just constantly visualize about the river and how it's carrying me with such ease. And we're bringing along all the other life forms. It took a very long time, to probably several years of actually embodying that. I could imagine it, but before I could embody it, that was a lot of not heavy, but much more focused practice to really embody that source from the source.
We share similar practices, Joanna. If you had something to say to other leaders, and of course, close to our hearts, other women leaders who are dealing with leadership in a whole different way in the world right now, I'm going to say advice because I can't come up with a better word. But, so what advice would you give them to build source within themselves? Because it is a practice. So what would you say to them that would help them get into the flow of that river and let themselves be carried?
It's just carving out as much time as feasible to be in silence and to open up whatever way they need to do to be able to open up communication pathways between their minds and their hearts and their guts, their intuition. And people have different ways of going about it, but too much of what is expected of leaders has to come from something that's very cognitive, from the mind. But the more quiet you can create to actually source the intelligence or the answers from the heart and the gut, that presencing that you do, that quiet, the more you can do that with the appreciation that you're not alone in this, that there are, the air that you're breathing that was created by the trees that are out there, the flowers that have brought you some joy and a sense of beauty around you, all the ways in which the earth and all the other species are giving to you. Rely on that, but find the space and the quiet to connect to heart and gut. That is the path for good leadership. And you basically just need to make sure you're doing that 5 times a week. Just fun. It's like the doing, not doing, really.
You get to sleep in on Saturday and Sunday,
Yeah.
Yeah. The importance of that practice as a commitment. That's like the strongest leadership practice. And that allows you to build that beyond resilience, be in the interconnectedness that we cannot have if we're speeding over everything and up here in our heads trying to figure everything out and get it right and not make a mistake. Yeah.
And some people have told me that I've coached on this. They said, oh, when I did it, actually, I solved this problem at work that I hadn't been able to figure out, just because all of a sudden there was space to just allow the solution to come through the body. And it didn't have to be figured out up here. It's the slowing down, the spaciousness, the groundedness, the connecting. That's what we all need to be doing right now. And that slowing down, that only has to be 20 minutes a day. And if you can't find that time, then what the hell are you doing?
I love to hear you say that.
So, Joanna, I'm so conscious that we're running out of time, and it's been such a fabulous conversation, and I've learned a lot from it. So I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to add to what you've said already about resilience or beyond resilience?
Yeah, I think you're doing a really great thing to help us think in new ways around resilience and around coping. These aren't coping strategies. This is about beyond resilience. It is about community building, right? What I'm talking about. None of us want to sweep under the carpet all of the suffering that is happening. And I certainly acknowledge all the privileges that I've had that have enabled me to build beyond resilience. But I guess I would just say you don't have to go through extreme trauma or have these extreme experiences in order to build this stuff. I'm envious of this generation that's coming into the world where meditation is a given, right? It's just talked about. When I was in my 20s, nobody would ever talk about this as something that was beneficial to one's leadership, mental health, and state of the world. So it's beyond coping, it's beyond resilience. And yeah, I just hope everybody finds their organizing home, their community, and are just really clear about the things that they want to save and fight for, the things that they love, and get out there and do it with others and have fun.
Thanks so much. Thanks for bringing it back to so much opportunity and possibility at the end of our conversation. It has been all the way through, but that was just a beautiful ending. Joanna, how can people find you if they would like to contact you and have more of your wisdom?
All right. As of this week, I have a new email address, joanna@nuthatch.world.
World, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. And NutHatch, for those of your listeners who don't know, she's the most amazing little bird. They're an amazing little bird. They're found in every continent. I got to know them very well through COVID when I had to stay in place. And they jump up and down trees upside down in order to have a very different perspective to find food. just a great little metaphor to head into the world. Sometimes we need to go right upside down to find new perspectives.
I love it. Thank you so much for being with us. And I'm sure our listeners will want to come and find out more about new perspectives and jumping upside down and reinforcing your leadership with you for the world that we're creating through this. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.
What struck you about the conversation?
I thought there was amazing amounts of depth in that conversation. But what really she came back to again and again was community. And I got the message that interdependence is not a weakness, it's a strength. And we always hear independence, got to cope on your own, got to deal with things on your own. And that narrative is just so back to front. And then again, what struck me right from the beginning was this idea that what we understand about scarcity versus abundance is all back to front too. This idea that if we don't have all these material things, then we're going to be vulnerable, and actually we're vulnerable because we don't have the relationships.
Yeah, totally. And what I got from her as well is it's not about not enjoying these nice things, but it's when we use them as armor to shore ourselves up, to make ourselves invulnerable. And that just doesn't work. It's an outside-in approach, and it can never work. And you and I are both convinced of this, but I think what we really want you in the listening to this to hear that life is interconnected. There's no getting away from it. So you can separate yourself from it, but that's where the pain is. That's where the true long-lasting pain is. And what I particularly loved was the way Joanna spoke about that. So there's an interconnectedness of life that I think on an intellectual level we can see. Like almost if you were looking above the earth, you can see like satellite systems, almost you can draw lines and see interconnectedness. But I particularly loved the way Joanna spoke about life loving you back, the gift that nature gives to us, and the interconnected, like the air that we breathe, which is given by the trees and the processes. And I know, again, that's scientific and that we can see it like from that flat perspective. But when you really get it, it feels so rich and deep. Like you said at the very beginning, there's a rich depth to it. And it feels quite miraculous in a sense. And I wish other people could feel that. And the beyond resilient world is that actually being more connected to what is already there. It's not as if it's not there. We don't have to go and get it or make it. It's there.
And on that, which I thought she brought out, was this interconnectedness between the mind, the heart, and the gut. And actually, that is the first step. Is actually part of our problem is that we're living in our heads and we're not even connected to ourselves, let alone anyone else. So making those first effort internally to really embody that connectedness with ourselves and with ourselves is what then can allow us to better connect to others and to nature and to the wider world.
Yeah, I know that. And adding to what you've said also that requires slowing down. And I find it more and more crazy that when I speak about this with my clients, that it's counterintuitive to slow down. I find it crazy that it be counterintuitive because that we've gotten to this stage in the world, because it wasn't that long ago that I'm going to say ancestors, but I'm thinking of my grandparents and even my parents, but more my grandparents and of course their parents and grandparents. Slowing down was actually normal. There was reflection time. And somehow we've lost that. And it's even become counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Well,
So I was just so pleased, Joanna, on.
It was a fantastic conversation. I hope that our listeners have been able to retain some of that wisdom, or if any of you were thinking of like feeling any guilt in slowing down, or if you were still having doubts about it, that you test it out. And saying that on the eve of leaving tomorrow for my own week-long retreat, which is all about not only slowing down and meditating, but deeply connecting heart, body, and mind, and being very present in ourselves. I started doing this in 2009 when it seemed impossible with 3 young children and my own business, and how could I take time away? And committing, I think, to that as a practice first. And I would like to add to make it a commitment rather than a conditional, rather than waiting for the right moment. So I will be sending peace and love from there for everybody as well.
I'm going to end with one thing that I thought her one phrase that just jumped out at me. She said, change happens at the speed of trust. And I just love that quote. And I thought, in this world where we're feeling scared and lonely, that to just open your heart out, to reach out to people, to start to trust people is so important. And I urge every one of our listeners to take that as an action today and try and figure out how they can open up their hearts a little bit more and trust people more.
Few things to take away: the trust, the self-trust, the slowing down. And we will be back with another episode soon with more wisdom and more ways to lean into that beautiful river, to be that swan on the river.
Thank you all. And that brings us to the end of another episode of the World Beyond Resilience podcast.
If anything you heard today sparked an aha moment or made you think differently about resilience, please tell us about it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.
And please share it with everyone you know.
For more episodes exploring how we can thrive beyond just bouncing back, follow our show on your favorite platforms.
And of course, we have additional resources and deeper dives into all the topics we discuss on our website, which is worldbeyondresilience.com.
So we absolutely love this topic, and we can see the possibility for this to create really powerful, vibrant, prosperous change in organizations and systems. So if this conversation interests you and you start to feel that spark as well, and you think it would be useful for yourself or within your organization, feel free to get in contact. So until next time, remember, there's a whole world of possibilities beyond just being resilient. Take care.